Passwords can be one of the weak points in any security system, so we have to make sure to manage them correctly and make sure that the policies are going to be robust enough to withstand scrutiny. And that's the conversation we're going to have starting right now.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Welcome back to Security Blast here at IT Pro TV, and today we are talking about password policies. That's right. Probably the bane of most of our existences. If you've ever worked in any kind of administration, or even if you've set up your own PCs, you've dealt with passwords and what you can and cannot do as far as a password goes. Wes, you're going to kind of try to walk us through those types of password policies that are common to help make them secure and not the weak spot for us, right?
Most definitely, and when it comes to any kind of password policy, we do have to keep in mind that a password policy is really going to be defined by whatever your corporate security policy is. All right. So what are password policies? Really, they're just a collection of required attributes that are applied to passwords, and they really define how you can construct a password. Now, they also define and sometimes what type of passwords you can use. So let me give you an example of some of the components of a password policy, right? They define things like complexity. I want you to remember, or if you're not aware, I want you to know of what are known as complexity rules, right? Complexity rules define the character sets that are required to make your passwords, make your passwords here. And what I mean by that is we have 4 character sets, right? If you haven't heard of them called that before, you've definitely used these before if you've ever created a password, right? So we have 4 character sets. The very first one, think of your letters, right? We say letters, we say lowercase. A through Z lowercase. The next character set is going to be, well, it's A through Z uppercase, right? Then we also have numbers, and then finally we have special characters. So if your password policy defines you have to have complexity attributes in there, it's going to require you to use uppercase and lowercase, at least one, uppercase and lowercase. I guess that's 2, uppercase, lowercase. It's going to require you to use those numbers, again, 0 through 9, and then the special characters as well. Now, I'll tell you that certain companies will define different password policy requirements. And let me define what I mean by that, right? You could have those inside of Active Directory that requires all of the users within your corporate networks to construct your passwords that way. But maybe you say, Wes, I'm just getting into IT. I've never been on a corporate network, so I've never seen this, and I would challenge that, right? Have you ever created a password when you've gone and created an account on a website that maybe you don't own? Right, and you go to type in that password and it says, it doesn't meet the complexity requirements. It doesn't meet the password requirements, and they give you a few little asterisks there, and they kind of help you along and say, well, you need at least 1 uppercase, 1 lowercase, and you need at least a number, and you need to use special characters, but you can't use these special characters. And a lot of times that's because we don't want those characters they give you the ability to construct things like SQL injection attacks, so they might limit the special characters. If you've ever done that, that's a password policy. It's not a password policy in the context of a corporate environment, but it's certainly a password policy as part of account management on the front end of that web application that you're creating the account on.
I would love it if they would just hit the create secure password button. I guess they have with like password managers such as LastPass and whatnot. You can use those services, but it'd be just nice if those things were built in. You go, generate me a secure password. I don't have, do you want this low frustration or high frustration? that could be definitely simplify the process. And I get it. There are different special characters that they might want to avoid because of possible issues. But if we all know that those are characters that could cause issues, you think we could standardize this by now?
You think we could? That's right. And unfortunately, it's not always the case. And we always joke around with convenience versus security. And it's definitely that fine line of making things secure, but so secure that your users can't get in, and also not making it so convenient that we're wide open and everybody can get in. So some of the other things that examples of things that define how you construct your passwords is history. They call it password history inside of a Windows domain. I also want you to think of it as password reuse. So I like to add that term there. So when we say password history, what does that mean? No, you don't have to open up a history book here. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, let's say that I've used a password and this is not a complex password. Let's say capital P @SS1234 exclamation point, right? That hits all of the complexity requirements, right? We've got an uppercase, lowercase, we got special characters as well as numbers in there, right? But I've already used that password, right? And how long I use that password, we'll talk about duration here in a second. But then when I have to change my password, how many passwords uniquely do I have to cycle through before I could ever go back to an earlier password? And this is important to enforce this, because if it comes time to change your password, well, I change my password and I change it to the same thing. Well, you technically changed your password by entering the characters, but you used the exact same value. All right, so history is just how many unique passwords do you have to cycle through before you can reuse a password. And that's why I like to put the term reuse there. Length as well, how many characters has to be involved. This is as simple as that. Do you need to use 7 characters? Do you need to use 8 characters? Now, I'll tell you, standard users that don't have a lot of privileges, you might see 7 to 8 characters. You might have a very highly privileged account that might require you to maybe enter 15 characters. And I know it's pain, but remember, security versus convenience. And then you might even have to tack on things like MFA or 2FA on top of that. I've already mentioned the expiration, right? How long do we want to allow a user to use a password before they need to change it, right? And again, the convenience part was, hey, let's go ahead and let them use it for 6 months. And that's very convenient, because I only had to remember one password for 6 months, but that also gives threat actors 6 months to try to break that password. And if we say, let's reduce that a little, maybe 30 days, maybe 60, a lot of times the default's 30 days, but after a month, you're gonna have to rechange that password. And when you see these in totality used together, you have to have a strong password, which is complexity requirements. You can only use that password, let's say 24 times, or I'm sorry, you have to cycle through 24 new passwords before you can ever reuse the other one. It has to be, let's say, a minimum of 7 or 8 characters, and it's going to expire in 30 days. And what this does is, while it does maybe lower the convenience level for some of your users, it certainly increases your security a little bit, because we've talked about password-based attacks. It's not the say all, hey, you've done everything you can for securing your passwords. That's certainly not the case and not what I'm advocating here, but it definitely makes it a little bit more difficult for the threat actors who never sleep and they're always trying to run things like brute force attacks, rainbow tables, right? And it helps to make them a little bit more resilient to those password-based attacks.
Man, too bad we can't automate the password policy system to say, hey, we'll allow you to use 4-character passwords, and we will auto-adjust the time for the expiration based off how long it takes to crack a 4-character password. So, yeah, you can use the word password, but then you have to change it once every 12 minutes, and you're good to go. Or not even. It takes no time at all to crack that password. So very funny. And I also find it interesting how clever an end user can get when they want to get around the system. They claim ignorance on everything. Oh, I'm just not a computer person. But you give them an ability to get around changing that password back to what they want it to be, because you don't set that history. They'll run right through 12 different passwords, and now I can reuse that password again. Yay, look at me. So they get really creative on that.
I would say a bad actor is probably just as dangerous as a bored end user.
Yeah,
for sure. So, Dan, what do you say we go ahead and rather than do a lot of the talking here, maybe we go ahead and we dive in and we kind of see what some of these attributes look like.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because it's one thing to talk about these things, right, and to think of them theoretically. But let's see some of this in action, how we can set some of this stuff up so that we can actually implement some security.
Sounds good, Dan. So what I've done here is I've logged into a Windows Server 2019 box, and I've already got Active Directory services installed, and that is where we can actually set these password policies. I would encourage you, if you have Windows 10 and you're running like Windows 10 Pro, type in your little search field down here in your taskbar, SECPOL, SECPOL, and you'll see an edit the local security policy, and you can find these same settings there, so you can also look at it. But remember, we want centralized administration, so we're doing this from the tools option, and we're going to load up the group policy management console, and we're just going to take a look at the default domain policy. I'm not going to make any edits here, but I want you to be able to see where they were. So we're going to go ahead, and what we're going to do, and to see this a little bit better, let me kind of zoom in here, and hopefully that will help you out. I'm under the group policy objects here, and I'm going to choose edit. And then this screen will come up, and let me go ahead and kind of move this to the side here. And we want to be under policies here, and we're going to open up policies. We're going to open up the Windows settings, and then from Windows settings, we're going to open up our security settings. And I know it's definitely a twisted rabbit hole, and we are going down that rabbit hole. But then under security settings, I want you to see that there is something known as account policies. And yes, we're going to open and expand that up. And notice right here we have password policies. Now, little joke. I love this arrow because when you click it, all it does is disappears. And that's been in Active
It's
Directory
just saying,
forever.
hey, there it is.
That's right.
all.
It's right there. But you'll see that we do have some settings, Dan. And let me kind of expand this out just a little bit here. Notice that we have this enforced password history. If you aren't aware of what these settings are for your study purposes, I highly recommend selecting the password policy itself and right-clicking and choosing properties here. And this is not only where you can define it right here. Notice it says keep password history for 24 passwords. This means to be able to use password number 1 from the time that I hit 24. I can't do that until it's the 25th time I've changed my password. And that gives you the little explain button right there, and it'll show you exactly what these values are and explain exactly what you are configuring too. So I really like this console. Now the next one here, notice the maximum password age. This one here by default in our Windows domain is 42 days. You might have this more restrictive. I think the default in the network that I worked at before I came to IT Pro TV, I believe it was 30 days. Now there's a minimum password age, so don't confuse these two. Maximum, how long before it expires, right? 42 days, it expires, you need to change it. Minimum password age is how we enforce password history. Let me tell you what I mean by that, right? If I don't have a password age set, if I set this to 0, let's say, but I have an enforced password history, there is nothing stopping your end users from quite literally today they set their password and they change it 24 times within 5 minutes, and now they can reuse your password. So they bypass that whole remember 24 passwords.
That's what I meant when I said they get real crafty.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. They're completely inept when it comes to everything else, and they want you to do it for them. But when it comes to getting around that password policy, they
sure
super
will.
Genius hackers. Yeah.
You better believe it, with a PhD on
Yeah,
them. So that's the password age. The password age says, hey, in this case, it says, change your password. But now you have to use it for a day before you can change it again, which means the way this password policy is now currently set up, I have to wait 24 days, maybe 25 days, before I can reuse a password. So I can change it, I'm going to use it for a day. I can change it again, got to use it for a day. I can change it right up until 24 passwords remembered. So you know that if they do get crafty like that, it's going to take them 24 days before they can ever recycle through the first password. So that's kind of how that works. Minimum password length, that's password length. How many characters? By default, you can see that it's 7. All right. Now, the next one here that I really want you to really pay attention to based on our conversation here in this episode is the password must meet the complexity requirements. And what that means is that's where the special characters come in. Like I said, if any of these ever get confused, and you don't have to be in an Active Directory environment, if you're doing this on Windows 10 and you're using the local security policy console, you can right click on these two and you can see and choose the explanation button there, and it gives you a great explanation of it. Contains characters of 3 of the following 4 categories. Those are the character sets that we talked about, and this will really give you a good understanding when it comes to account management. Not only why we use passwords, but if you were asked where and how do we implement them, well, right here you can see it, and you should be doing well for the Security Plus exam.
Well, it's definitely, password policies are almost just as much an art as it is a science, because you're trying to figure out that right combination of all those policies to make sure you have a good secure system, but also something that isn't going to make your users want to pull their hair out. So we understand that, and hopefully you're going to figure that out for your environment now that you know what to do with that. Being said, we're out of time for this episode. We do appreciate you watching, though, and we'll appreciate when we see you in the next episode and all the others in this Security Plus series. Until then, though, have yourself a great day.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.